My wife and I got to puppy sit this weekend. And during this time, it gave me an opportunity to reflect on my relationship with dogs. Like most people my generation, I grew up watching movies and shows about boys and their dogs. Unfortunately, my first encounter with a dog was not a very positive one. When I was about 5 years old, I got bitten by a dog, which later we found out had rabies. So I had to receive the 14 shots around my belly button. It was not a fun thing to do. So I developed a respect, if not a fear, about dogs because of that encounter. There's another story that I like to say. And there was one time, one of my cousins and I were walking down the street, and we were encountered by an older kid in the neighborhood. My cousin and I must have been about 7, and the other kid looked taller than us, so he must have been about 10. Well, he wanted for us to give him our money. I was willing to turn the money over immediately, but my cousin refused. And the older kid grabbed him by the neck, pushed him against the wall, and said, "Give me your money now." And next thing I know, he starts beating my cousin. Well, I didn't know what to do. I am a lover, not a fighter. Well, it was too far to run home for help. So I started looking around, not knowing what to do. Well, there was a stray dog that used to hang around the neighborhood. And I looked over to him. He was sleeping. And the first thing that came to mind was to yell out, "Blackie, Blackie." I don't even know what the dog's name was. But the dog woke up and saw what was happening. And he started running towards us. I'm not sure if he was running towards all of us or towards the guy who was beating up my cousin. But all I know is that the guy got so scared that he started to run. And that gave us plenty of time to get away. Now, I'm not sure if the last part of the story is true or not, but the way I remember it is that the dog came back with one of the guy's shoes in his mouth. Well, when I had my own children and they got old enough to understand what it was like to have a pet, they kept asking for a dog. Now, growing up, I never had any pets, unless you call the strays, dogs and cats that my mother would feed periodically pets, but they were not like the kind that you would pick up and play with them. So both my son and my daughter kept asking for a dog. I kept explaining to them the amount of responsibility that it is to have a dog and to take care of him and how expensive it can be. The one phrase that I remember my son saying that made me think was, "Dad, I want to have a dog while I'm still a kid." Well, that caused me to have a moment of weakness. So one day on our way to a family reunion, my sister-in-law calls and says, "I have a dog for you, but you have to be okay with it." So after a whole day of heavy negotiation, we finally agreed that she would get my kids a beagle. So when we got to the family reunion, they had the baby beagle up to the side, still waiting to make sure that I was okay with it. So when I saw him and saw how cute he was, I said, "Okay, you can give it to them." So they brought the kids into the room and sat them down. And they brought this puppy to them. And they were so excited to see him. And everybody stood around and asked, "What are you going to name him?" And without missing a beat, my son said, "He's going to be called Snoopy." Well, throughout the years, as expected, having a pet, it's a lot of responsibility and very expensive too. But we grew very attached to him, my kids in particular. Snoopy was always great at catching food. On several occasions, we had guests and they got careless, and next thing you knew, he would grab the food out of their hands. On several occasions, Snoopy was the first one to get a taste of our Thanksgiving turkey. He was also the first one to get birthday cake, at least twice. On one occasion, he reached up on the table, opened the pizza box, and removed a pizza slice without anybody noticing. It wasn't only edible things that he liked. One time he even ate my wife's diamond rings. Believe me, I followed that dog around for 3 days before I finally found the diamond rings. I won't go into detail about that. He was also a great watchdog because no matter what, he would go crazy. And of course, those of you who know beagles, you know that they don't bark, they howl. He lived with us 14 years. He just died last summer. Now I feel a little bit guilty that I wasn't more affectionate with him, even though he seemed to like me a lot. He was usually the first one to greet me when I got home. As he got slower, he didn't get to me till I got to the bedroom, but he was always around me when I was at home. Sometimes I would sit to eat, and he would lay next to me, and he would inch closer and closer until part of his body was touching my leg. I remember one time we took him to the vet, and the vet asked me, "Can you please put him on the table?" And my wife looked at him and said, "He never touches the dog." The vet could not believe it. But over the years, once in a while, when nobody was looking, I would pet him. Not for too long. I didn't want for him to get used to it. But as it goes, I was always the one who had to bathe him. And I was always the one who had to take care of other unpleasant things that you have to do to dogs periodically to make sure that they stay healthy. And I was also with him at the very end. But despite all the food that he stole from me and all the remotes that he chewed up, I miss the crazy dog. I miss Snoopy.